Greetings, I'm Richard. This is my channel, The Heretic Knight, and I'm here today to talk to you about Horde Mode for Warhammer 40,000. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what is Horde Mode for 40,000? Let me explain. Warhammer 40,000, great game, but you don't always want to bash your friends' faces in, or depending on your skill level in the army that you're using, get your own face bashed in. Or you could be like me, perhaps, and have a very erratic schedule, making it difficult to commit to, yes, I will on this date here be available for play. But you still want to justify all the money that you spent on models and, actually play some Warhammer and you keep yourself up to date and familiar with the rules, so that way when you do have a chance to play, you can. And so this is where the idea of Horde Mode came into being. Developed by the fine gentleman over at the PoorHammer podcast. It is a rule set for cooperative Warhammer 40,000 that works between 1 and 4 players. So it works great for solo play, or if you've got a small group of friends that you just want to mess around with for a bit. Now, part of Horde Mode is producing cards. Now, you don't have to produce cards. The 3 decks that are used have 12, 20, and 20 events in them, or cards in them, I should say, which corresponds quite nicely with 12-sided dice and 20-sided dice. This obviously does some things with probability if you try to do it this way. You should probably have like a table and like check things off to make sure you're not like double drawing cards. Perfectly able to do Horde Mode without printing cards. And you definitely don't need to do anything that I am about to talk about when it comes to printing the cards either. But I kind of view this as sort of like almost hobby adjacent. It's like, part of the fun of this hobby, in my opinion, in a way is doing silly things. It's like, I don't have to paint. It's like, this is a Tyrannid. This is a Grey Knight's Chaplain. I don't need the Tyrannid painted to be able to tell this is a Tyrannid. And while it's awesome that the Chaplain is painted, I don't need him painted to be able to know that he's my Grey Knight Chaplain. Don't worry, the Tyrannid's not staying gray plastic. I'm going to paint him. But even though we don't have to do these things, a lot of us still really do enjoy doing them just because it's the hobby. We like doing things with our hands and being a little bit creative. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here. We don't have to go through and make all of this mess that I've got here. I don't know. I like it. It's kind of fun. And legitimately, handling a deck of cards like these is a lot better in the hand and just feels a lot better, in my opinion, at least, than trying to fumble around with a bunch of slips of paper, which are orders of magnitude more difficult to deal with. Okay, so we have stack of paper, cards. And yes, I know my cards are the wrong color. The only thing that I can say in my defense is when your printer is complaining about the yellow ink cartridge being critically low, listen to it. It's telling you for a reason. That aside, we have our stack of paper and we need to get these turned into these. How are we going to go about doing this? Well, the most obvious and direct answer to that is the wonderful tool known as scissors. You've almost undoubtedly got at least one of these in the house someplace. I suppose it's possible that you might not, in which case, seriously, go out and buy a pair of scissors. They're really useful to have around. And obviously that's going to work just fine. Assuming that you printed your cards out on standard printer paper. If you had access to cardstock, or you went out and got cardstock for printing out your Horde Mode cards, please, for the love of your hand, don't use scissors. you will be in pain by the time you are done cutting out 60 cards. Don't do it. No, not 60. 20, 40, 52, 54. 54 cards. By the time you get done printing out 54 cards, yeah, you're... Speaking from experience of cutting cardstock by hand with scissors, it's not fun. I don't recommend it. So that's a sort of an aside there. But yeah, if you've got just regular old standard printer paper, yeah, sure. Scissors will work. A tool that I can almost guarantee that you have around that I recommend that you absolutely do not use unless you are way sturdier with your hands than I am, and that would be your X-Acto knife. And oh, you are wobbly. Why are you wobbly? Tighten you up. Yeah, obviously you can use this. Don't. Couple of reasons. One, you're going to be dulling your blade, and you probably don't want a dull blade when you're trying to clean up your sprues. Two, it's like, yeah, you will be cutting into whatever's your paper sitting on. So, yeah, probably shouldn't use the X-Acto knife. What I do recommend, especially if you think you might be doing more with cards, like maybe you want to print out secondary objectives for the regular game or make up unit cards to refresh your memory so you have like a physical copy of what your units do so you don't have to constantly be on a phone looking up stats or something like that in the middle of a game, is I would invest in a very simple little paper cutter. Something like this will probably set you back $8. You might even be able to get one for quite a bit cheaper. If you happen to be in the US, Michael's almost constantly has like 30 or 40% off one item coupons. And yeah, you can use that on these. So you could potentially pick one up for really cheap. These are very handy. Especially if you're like doing anything craft related involving paper. It is very handy to have one of these sliding paper cutters available. Just be forewarned, there are some very pricey options available out there, which I would absolutely not recommend unless you are like legitimately getting into paper crafts, which is obviously way beyond what I'm talking about here. But these are really useful, and if you did the cardstock thing, buy one of these. Trust me, you don't want to be doing the cardstock without one of these. Do be aware that, like anything with a blade, this does need to be replaced, and mine is in dire need of being replaced, which is why all of my cuts are going to be a little bit fuzzy. Okay, so we've taken our paper and we've turned it into cards. What do we do next? Because obviously these little tiny slips of paper, they just fly everywhere. They're a pain. Okay. Well, we could glue them to other cards, and you've probably got some available. For example, maybe you got some data cards from the previous versions. So this is my 9th edition Grey Knight data cards. I mean, they're not even worth keeping for art, because I mean, the backs are just, and the actual card content is just text with icons on it. So yeah, these are pretty much worthless. And yeah, if I fit the card over one of these, it fits pretty good. I'd be able to paste that on or glue that on pretty easily. And now I have an actual like card to support it for shuffling and dealing. I don't like that particular option too much because you are going to have to update your cards from time to time. And so then you either have to paste back over an existing paper card, and that after a couple of rounds of that, yeah, it starts getting not good to feel in the hand. Or you just have to throw that card away and do a new one. What I instead recommend are card sleeves. Now, this particular one is perhaps a little bit excessive. I went into the local hobby gaming shop and I saw this, and I'm sorry. It's a little white dragon burning Santa's hat off. Of course I had to get it. Perhaps not the best choice, mind you, for Horde Mode, because all 3 of my decks are going to have the same back if I use this for all 3 decks. And I certainly wasn't going to go out and buy 3 different one of these because this was $15. Now, you can get card sleeves for much, much cheaper than that. But, yeah, I wanted to support my local gaming store. And like I said, that's a dragon burning Santa's hat off. Right? So, baseball sleeves are actually really easy to find because collecting baseball cards, it's a thing. And those generally will not have a printed back to them. Instead, it will be clear on both sides of the sleeve. So that will work out pretty good, especially if you get print out a back to also put in the sleeve, which, yes, a backing is coming. Speaking as the person who helps with the PDF creation of the cards. I am working on that. But what I have is card sleeves. Now these by themselves will help, but where things really work out great is combining this, and another card. Oh, and another option that I failed to mention, which again probably more unique to my scenario than most people's, is you can actually buy blank playing cards like this. Like 4 to 6 cents each, depending on how and where you buy them. You can also just use regular old, like a 52 card deck of playing cards. You probably got one of those hanging around the house someplace. Lots of options. In all likelihoods, the only thing that you would have to buy are the card sleeves. And so what I would do, once I have these produced, is sometimes these sleeves can be a little bit hard to open up. Of course, now my cat would decide this is when he wants to eat. What I generally do is pinch my fingers together and slide my fingers across, and that will buckle the card protector and cause it to open up. Then I can slip a card in there, take the actual printed card, get that in. Sometimes I'll have to buckle it again, and there we go. I now have a card. And I can just go through and continue to do that for all of my cards. And these are a lot easier to handle than a stack of these. One last thing I want to point out, just in case you are going to go down the route of getting one of these. These can take a little bit of getting used to, and also some pointers. Speaking as the person who did these cards, I need to go back through and redesign the layout on these. I'm not happy with them, but with the layout that you are going to get with version 0.83 of Horde Mode, there are a couple of gotchas when it comes to processing these PDFs. The black lines that you see on the page, don't cut to those if you want to use card sleeves. That's wider than what will fit into one of these. The actual card itself is perfectly sized to 2.5 to 3.5 inches, which is standard playing card size. So when you go to cut these out, if you want to put them into protectors, you have to cut right on the edges of the card. The top and bottom isn't quite as important, but the left and right sides of the card, yeah, you got to be right on there. What I generally do is I will start by carefully lining it up on the top, and I will do this one page at a time. The reason for this, unless you have a very accurate printer, your pages are not going to line up perfectly. Like, I can take these 2 pages here, and obviously this isn't going to work on camera, so you are just going to have to simply trust me that by holding these up to a light, I can see that the cards ever so slightly don't match up. The lines are ever so slightly off because they weren't printed on a high-end industrial printer. They were printed on a standard office printer that does not care if there is like a half-degree wobble in the print of a page. It doesn't matter. But if you're trying to precisely cut out multiple pages at a time, that tiny little error does actually matter, unfortunately. So I would recommend doing this one page at a time, unless you've got a really good printer. See here, I clipped off a little bit on the top. I was like a little bit too close, but that's fine. I like to be a little bit close. And I will go through and using the guides, oops, almost made a mistake there. Try to line things up so that I am cutting right on top, and turn it around and do the same thing. Again, use, most of these will have like a little notch like on this one. Again, I don't know how well this is going to come across on the camera. There's little notches. That shows you where the blade is. And even on a really cheap one like this, that's pretty accurate. So I put this in here. I use the blade, or those notches, to line it up. Do my best just to guesstimate on the other side. Now you don't have to use a lot of force on these. Even with my incredibly dull blade, I have to use almost no force at all to cut the page. And in fact, with a dull blade, I'll make it worse if I try to use force. And I will cut it down, top and bottom, as close as I can, into a strip like this first. Now I will go through, and because I've got those tops and bottoms trimmed off, it's a lot easier for me to try and line up and just go back and forth, cutting out the cards. And once you get a little bit of practice with it, you can get a pretty good rhythm going, and you can get really good straight even cuts fairly quickly once you're used to using the tool. Spin that card around. There we go. And now I have 3 cards cut out reasonably easily, reasonably cleanly. Again, like, yeah, there's a lot of fuzziness to these cuts. Like I said, I really have to change this blade. There you go. It's like, that's it. That's all I want to talk about. Again, do you need to do all of this and make this mess and, yeah, all of this nonsense? No, you don't. Again, it's like, you know, why do we paint our models, right? It's just, I don't know, it just feels better. Just going back to this point one more time, it just feels better to have these in my hand than it does to have a bunch of tiny little slips of paper that I feel like I'm going to destroy if I look at them wrong. This also helps protect them too. And also, reduce, reuse, recycle, right? He says as he produces a whole bunch of paper scrap. But yeah, it's like I can repurpose my little data cards here to use as card backs. So I actually get some use out of these. All right, that's all I got. If you found this video useful, thumbs up would be appreciated. And if I've just wasted your time, well, thumbs down button's right next to it. Until next time.